Four components of every gangsta rap song are guns, drugs, women, and excess. But it wouldn't be so if Schoolie D had chosen another path and wasn't the voice of his neighborhood in the 1980s. There are some people whom without, gangsta rap would have never been as popular as it is now. Schoolie D and Ice-T were right at the beginning. Specifically, Ice-T began his gangsta rapper career after being influenced by Schoolie D. Then it was NWA with its blockbuster gangsta rap album Straight Outta Compton, and Ice Cube, who added political topics to gangsta rap. Above the Law also played a crucial role in the movement with their album Livin' Like Hustlers. Then, in 1992, Dr. Dre released The Chronic, which showed that gangsta rap could be popularized the same as other pop-oriented rap styles. In 1996, Tupac signed with Death Row and released All Eyes on Me, and another album of his, The Don Killuminati, The 7 Day Theory, released under his alias Machiavelli. 3 6 Mafia and Project Pat took gangsta rap more so to its dark extremes, and we wouldn't really call this gangsta rap as a whole, but there were elements that influenced them. Then new artists appeared, such as Jay-Z, DMX, 50 Cent, and G-Unit, who made gangsta rap a bit more casual and mainstream. In 2011, drill appeared as a new flow of gangsta rap as its origins that was much, much more violent, with people like Lil Durk, Chief Keef, G Herbo, Lil Reese, and then later on, much later on, people like King Von. When we talk about gangsta rap, we shouldn't forget about the man who stood right at the beginning of this genre, Schoolie D. He wasn't involved only in creating rap songs, but album covers and art. Schoolie D was born in 1962 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When he was 9 years old, he already led a band because he was born into a musical family. So it came naturally to him. The most interesting thing about Schoolie D was the way he perceived music. Just imagine when John Coltrane used to walk into the studio, like the same as Blue and Green. He would see music in colors. Nobody believed him, but his music was, this is John Coltrane. Imagine me watching all these sparkles. Like I've seen these effing sparkles and these sparks and all this energy. I could actually see it. And nobody effing believed me except for a handful of people. They were like, as soon as you find your voice, you just have to be patient. And just 10 years later, he was already in a more serious music business, producing and distributing his albums. Schoolie D quickly became famous because of the uncompromising lyrics of his songs. He openly rapped about how it was those days living on the streets, violence, racism, and sex. Hip-hop was still a subculture back then, so there were not many people who raised the same issues as Schoolie D did. Most artists were conscious of their public image and didn't really want to be involved in something controversial. It was a bit frustrating because I knew I had something. I come from a musical family, so I knew I had to say something. I knew I was going to do something my whole effing life. It was almost out of frustration. One of his early memories about hip-hop was about the neighborhood party that was surrounded by West Philly row houses. Royal Rhyme and 12 other rappers were preparing and rehearsing. Schoolie D was one of the DJs. Royal heard me one time just messing around, and he liked it. At the next block party, he got me on the mic. As soon as I said hoes was the first time people noticed me. They stopped dancing, came over, and listened to what I had to say. Schoolie D felt that he really grabbed the attention of the crowd, and that feeling was intoxicating. Later, Schoolie D and Royal founded Schoolie D Records in 1983, which was the first record label that was run by a rapper in the hip-hop industry. When he was 22 years old, Schoolie D recorded Gangsta Boogie, which was grim and a kickstart for the hip-hop of those days. The protagonist for the song was Melly Mel and his life in the inner city, specifically selling drugs on the block. The tape was so successful that it moved from club to club, from one DJ to another. We really didn't have an organized distribution setup. I'd have to send cars to Texas or Baltimore and send my soldiers to take care of business. They had to be smart enough to collect the money, but dumb enough to bring it back to me. Then Schoolie D decided to take the record to DJ Lady B, who was an important person and had her own show on Power, which was one of the most influential hip-hop shows in Philadelphia. So he came up to her with this self-produced and self-pressed record to hear that his record was too grim, especially the way that he portrayed life. What are you talking about? I can't effing play this. I'm like, well, why? She was like, you really don't hear it? I'm like, no, is it bad? She's like, no, it's the shit. But you're talking about. I was like, so? And she was, you're gonna have to put this out yourself. So Schoolie D left displeased. I wanted to tell my stories the way I wanted to tell my stories. But he did not give up. He came back home and told his mom that he was going to start his own record label. His mom was shocked at first by such a statement, but Schoolie D found a place where he could press labels and distributors, which were about 40 stores that would sell his records as soon as he had them pressed. At first, it was hard to do things to get the money, but right after Schoolie D got it, everything started to look very promising. He knew some people, but it wasn't easy to persuade them to put his records out front. But when customers were visiting these stores, owners were telling them which records were new in such a fashion. Schoolie D's records were picked by the listeners. His famous songs, PSK, What Does That Mean, and Gucci Time, which were released in 1985, quickly became underground hits and a major event in hip-hop. When one heard PSK, What Does It Mean for the first time, the thoughts might as well be that it was another mid-80s track with a lot of reverb. But on the second time, someone would notice that the track itself is a solid rejection of mid-80s everything. It was not only anti-radio, but anti-establishment as well. I made those records, especially those first 4 records, for the love of music and for the voice of my homies in my neighborhood, and for my city. That's why PSK and Gucci Time was made. It was made for the art, not for the money. And Schoolie D emphasized that you won't have any possibilities in front if everything you want is a brick of cash. When PSK was released, it had an immediate effect on the crowd. I got home, Code dubbed the tapes, and he handed them out to everybody in the neighborhood. I was asleep. I woke up and I put on the radio. I was like, shoot, I gotta go to the studio and take out some of this effing reverb. I swear to you, I thought I was elected effing mayor. I walked out of the house and the whole neighborhood, the whole park side was out playing that song. Disco Len, his eyes were like, dude, you did it. You effing did it. And I whispered to Lynn, I was like, dude, I'm about to go take some of this reverb out. Lynn is about 6'6", 280 pounds. He was like, mother effer, if you take this reverb out, I'm gonna kill you myself. Leave that stuff in. Both of these songs were from his first album, Schoolie D, which he released in 1986, and it was inspired by Run DMC's album. Schoolie said that then everybody was like, oh, there's never been a whole rap album, just rap 12 inches. I was like, yeah, I'm a big fan also of all the Funkadelic stuff in their albums. Sitting there, they got the art, it's gotta be a whole package. Later the same year, Flemish MTV VJ, the person who introduced the music videos, Marcel Van Hilt, and a Dutch TV crew were shooting a documentary about hip-hop, filming a lot around New York and interviewed artists who performed in the genre, including Schoolie D. The documentary was broadcasted on Dutch television as big fun in the big town, and it attracted a lot of members of the young audience to hip-hop. This film made Schoolie D a bit more famous in the Netherlands than he even had presence before. Many years later, a band from Denmark, Osdorp Posse, sampled the speech that Schoolie D made in the film about hip-hop being raw and made it part of their track De Wet van Tokyo from their album Hard Kern Ramp that was released in 2000. Not only did Schoolie D influence youngsters overseas, but a lot of people across America as well, one of whom was Ice-T, and his track 6 in the Morning. Here's the exact chronological order of what went down. The first record that came out along those lines was Schoolie D's PSK. Then, the syncopation of that rap was used by me when I made 6 in the Morning. The vocal delivery was the same. PSK is making that green. 6 in the morning, police at my door. When I heard that record, I was like, oh shoot. And call it a bite or what you will, but I dug that record. My record didn't sound like PSK, but I liked the way he was flowing with it. PSK was talking about Parkside Killers, but it was very vague. That's the only difference. When Schoolie did it, it was one by one, I'm knocking him out. All he did was represent a gang on his record. I took that and wrote a record about guns, beating people down, and all that with 6 in the Morning. One time when Ice-T and Schoolie D were on the phone, Ice-T was about to release 6 in the Morning, but he wanted Schoolie D to hear it first because Ice-T wanted to make sure that Schoolie D knew that he wasn't biting his style and Schoolie D's art was a huge influence to him. So he played it for me over the phone. Halfway through, I guess he heard me yelling, "That's the shit." Schoolie D didn't really care if many artists were paying more and more attention to gangsta rap because he wasn't thinking about himself. These guys want to put their art out just like I want to put my art out. He was more positive about the whole influence thing because if he was affecting the art of other rappers, it was because someone affected him and his music preferences while he was coming up. In 1987, he released an album, Saturday Night, which did perform pretty well. But there were a few albums that weren't that popular, and despite having the same strong gangsta vibe, such as Am I Black Enough For You, which was released in '89, A Gangster Story, which was released in 1990, and Welcome to America, which was released in 1994. But this is unfortunately just one of the drawbacks of being a pioneer or first in certain markets. As Schoolie D was a strong influence on everybody around him, it was only natural that he was soon upstaged by many artists who first copied his style and then took gangsta rap in a new direction. With time, gangsta rap became more political, combative, and complex. There were many names that wanted to make an impact too. Also, Schoolie D made early observations that a few people around him started to have a lawyer mentality, which meant you had to be paid for making music. I was talking to some younger cats and the whole thing about hip-hop, the money, like how it is now. Kind of like, shoot, we're trying to get paid. We need to get money. Do y'all mother effers realize that if we had that attitude, hip-hop would have died in 1984? PSK and Gucci Tom wouldn't have been made if I was thinking about radio, thinking about getting a deal, thinking about crossing over, thinking about being on TV. As Schoolie D was doing everything by himself, he did album covers as well. On his first album's cover, Schoolie D, he drew a black and white comic strip in which he played the main role. One might say that the art was a reflection of how his music was perceived by people at that time. The next was his single, Parkside. On that cover, Schoolie D depicted his face and a long piece of film that comes from his mouth where we can clearly see a few scenes being shown. On the cover of his second album, Saturday Night, he depicted a self-portrait that was sprayed on a graffiti wall. In the next few albums, Schoolie D didn't draw anything until the 8th album, International Supersport, which was released in 2010. There, he drew himself being hit by a power beam, on which he reacted with a speech balloon. Damn, bopped again. When talking about the film, the director Abel Ferrara was in awe of Schoolie D's music and placed a few of his tracks in some of his movies, one of which was Bad Lieutenant in 1992, which had a track signifying rapper that was mixed with Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. Schoolie D also took part in voice acting in certain animations, for example, Space Ghost Coast to Coast from 1994 to 2008, and he was even on Aqua Teen Hunger Force for about 15 years, where he was a narrator and author of some of the music used. So it was a blessing and a beautiful thing to see that one of the originators, while he may have necessarily not gotten as much credit as deserved for gangsta rap, like Ice-T, for example, or NWA, who got even more credit than Ice-T, but it's a beautiful thing to see that he was still able to earn a good living within an industry that he had a lot of love for. Make sure to subscribe for more.